The Battle of Midway was one of the most important U.S. triumphs over the Japanese against their conquest in the Pacific. This was a major tragedy for the Japanese, as this marked the turning point in the Pacific after their fleet was crippled by the Americans with the use of naval counterintelligence, giving the U.S. a critical advantage for the rest of the war. On December 7, 1941, a Japanese fleet of 6 aircraft carriers launched 353 Imperial Japanese aircrafts, which included fighter, torpedo, and dive bomber planes, a couple miles off the coast of Hawaii territory, on a surprise attack to cripple the U.S. naval fleet. They successfully crippled all 8 battleships, with half of them capsizing or so damaged they were beyond repair, injuring over 1,100 people and killing over 2,400 Americans at Pearl Harbor. This was the beginning of America's involvement in World War II.
Of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
The U.S. government had many ideas of where the Japanese would strike again, but nothing stood out more than an island outpost right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, Midway Atoll. Located between Japan and Hawaii, maintaining control of Midway was a top priority. As if Midway goes, Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast could easily be next. Taking inspiration after Pearl Harbor, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto of the Empire of Japan started preparing for a surprise attack on Midway on the 4th of June, 1942. Just 7 months after Pearl Harbor, Admiral Yamamoto believed that they should quickly diminish American naval forces before they could repair and become too strong for the Japanese to face in the Pacific. His plan was to bring a small force of aircrafts to the Aleutian Islands the day before the invasion of Midway, to draw American forces stationed at Midway to leave it poorly defended. The Japanese would then bring their 3 phases of attack into action. In the first phase, Japan's first aircraft carrier group, the Akagi, Nakaga, Hiryu, and Soryu, led by Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo, would attack Midway by air, with the goal to disable all American defenses for the second phase. In the second phase, the main invasion force, led by Vice Admiral Nabutaki Kondo, will place 5,000 soldiers on the island to eliminate any remaining American resistance. In the third phase, having already been led astray by their deceptive strike in Alaska, Yamamoto expects American reinforcements from Pearl Harbor to arrive and attempt to retake Midway. Yamamoto plans to intercept them with his fleet of battleships and aircraft carriers to force an American retreat, marking a successful takeover of Midway and an even more battered American fleet unable to stop the power of the Japanese war machine. But this doesn't happen.
Stationed at Pearl Harbor, a U.S. naval code breaker named Joseph Rochefort, led by the U.S. Navy's Combat Intelligence Unit, to crack the Japanese military code. Rochefort's team have deciphered so much of Japan's military code by March 1942 that they discovered the exact date, time, and even strategy of the Japanese planned invasion of Midway. Hearing this news, Admiral Chester Nimitz drew up a plan to defeat the Japanese war machine, preparing to take on a fleet half their size. Taking advantage of knowing where the Japanese will attack, Nimitz splits his group of 3 carriers, the USS Yorktown, USS Hornet, USS Enterprise, and positioned them out of striking range, but still capable of ambushing the oncoming Japanese. On the morning of June 3, 1942, the Japanese struck the Aleutian Islands as planned. What Japan didn't expect was a small U.S. naval fleet already waiting there to defend the islands. Admiral Nimitz diverged a small but capable naval force in order to save a larger portion of U.S. naval power for the impending Midway invasion. As Nagumo's fleet nears Midway, he gets a warning of chances of U.S. carriers nearby, but didn't alert Yamamoto due to the fear of their military radio codes being compromised.
On the morning of June 4th, Nagumo launches the first phase of the invasion as planned. West of Midway, Vice Admiral Kondo's fleet is spotted by an American patrol, which was reserved and waiting for Phase 2 of the invasion. 9 B-17 bombers were sent to Kondo's fleet, but were unable to land a hit and were all destroyed. Respecting radio silence, Vice Admiral Kondo does not inform Nagumo of the attack, leaving him in the dark of American interference. Shortly after, Nagumo launches a wave of 108 aircraft towards Midway. Later, Japanese aircraft reach Midway Atoll. As sirens down at Midway blur to tell of the oncoming Japanese, Midway's hangars, runways, hospital, and power plant all are carpet bombed by the enemy. Midway's defenses were quickly overwhelmed, but U.S. Admiral Nimitz was prepared to react with a devastating counterattack.
June 5th, the next day, Nagumo's fleet prepares to launch another wave of bombardment, but is met with an opposing American fleet of aircraft arriving from the west and an American submarine flanking from the east. Being pressured by American forces, Nagumo prioritized the deployment of the second wave of aircraft to attack Midway, stunned by the fact that the Americans knew where he was located. Across the battlefield, the American carriers Enterprise and Hornet were launching dozens of aircrafts to attack the Japanese carriers, as Yorktown prepares to launch more. Nagumo's scouts were able to spot it, giving Nagumo an opportunity to attack, but only until his aircrafts returned. Yamamoto, confident in Nagumo's decision-making, decided not to interfere with the battle. Shortly after, American dive bombers arrived from the Hornet. Unescorted by fighters, all get shot down, and another wave of aircraft arrived from the Yorktown, with only 25% returning after the attack. Confident of their upper hand in battle, the Japanese start taking time to refuel and rearm their fighters, but out of nowhere, American aircrafts emerge in a surprise attack on the Nakaga. Commander Wade McCluskey was in charge of the first group of planes launched from the Enterprise that morning. Their mission was to attack the Japanese carriers that were heading towards Midway Island, but were unsuccessful in detecting the enemy. Low on fuel and unable to contact his superiors because of tactical radio silence, McCluskey had a decision to make. He could safely return to the Enterprise, or take one last shot at the enemy carrier with little fuel they have left. This is a choice later called by Admiral Nimitz, one of the most important decisions in the battle. McCluskey turns his group northwest following the path he thought the Japanese would take to head against the American fleet. His quick thinking turned the tide of Midway.
McCluskey's group drops 9 bombs that deal lethal damage to the vessel, killing the entire command staff, effectively eliminating the Nakaga from combat. Minutes later, an air group from the Yorktown arrived and attacked the Soryu, inflicting 3 hits on the port side, causing a chain reaction, resulting in the ship to burn into flames and capsizing. The next target is Admiral Nagumo's ship, the Akagi. Another air group arrives, destroying planes preparing to take off. Nagumo was forced to transfer off the burning Akagi to a nearby cruiser, the Nagara. Only one carrier remains, the Hiryu. The Hiryu was well ahead of the Japanese fleet. Nagumo knows that the battle is slipping away from him. He sends 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters to take off in a last-ditch effort to attack the Americans. But the Japanese air group was quickly intercepted by another American air group, but still managed to push through, damaging the vessel severely, but was still able to function in battle. Meanwhile, the Japanese sent out more aircraft and yet again encountered more American resistance. The Americans were able to destroy a few planes, but 5 Japanese torpedo bombers broke through. They landed 2 blows onto Yorktown, causing the carrier to tilt 26 degrees to its port side, effectively causing it to capsize, forcing Captain Elliot Buckmaster to abandon ship.
In retaliation, the Enterprise and the Hornet sent out all available dive bombers to attack the Hiryu. The air groups dove, landing several critical hits, leaving it disabled. It was the final surprise for the Japanese and the fatal blow. Having scored a decisive victory in the Pacific, American forces returned victorious, with the Japanese losing 4 carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, 292 aircraft, and 1,500 servicemen, costing hundreds of millions of yen, while the US only lost 307 servicemen, 145 aircraft, 1 destroyer, and 1 aircraft carrier, only a fraction of what the Japanese lost. This American triumph would put Japan on the defensive, costing them any opportunity of conquering the Pacific. Japan even knew that once they got the US involved in the war by surprise attack, at some point the US will catch on and eventually beat their tactics. Nobody summarized this fear better than Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto himself. Quote, "For a while we'll have everything our own way, stretching out in every direction like an octopus spreading his tentacles, but it'll last for a year and a half at most." End quote. The loss of Midway completely proved that fear, crushing Japanese morale. The decisive US victory would in the long term cost Japan the war, and with Japan eventually surrendering to the might of the atomic bomb in 1945.